In a bustling city known for its diverse population and thriving legal system, there lived a remarkable woman named Olivia Thompson. Born and raised in a tight-knit African American community, Olivia had always been acutely aware of the challenges faced by people of color in society. From a young age, she demonstrated an unwavering commitment to justice and equality, which would later shape her career and define her character. Olivia's parents, both hard-working individuals, instilled in her the values of integrity, perseverance, and compassion. They taught her to stand up for what was right, even in the face of adversity. Olivia excelled academically, earning top grades in school and securing a scholarship to a prestigious university. It was during her college years that she discovered her true calling, law. Determined to make a difference, Olivia pursued her legal education with unrelenting dedication. She immersed herself in the study of constitutional law, civil rights, and social justice, absorbing knowledge like a sponge. Her professors and peers marveled at her sharp mind, eloquence, and unwavering sense of purpose. Olivia's passion for the law was not merely academic. It was deeply personal, rooted in her own experiences and those of her community. Upon graduating with honors, Olivia embarked on a career as a defense attorney, representing clients from all walks of life. She quickly gained a reputation as a fierce advocate, unafraid to take on challenging cases and stand up to powerful adversaries. Her dedication to her clients and her skillful navigation of the legal system earned her the respect and admiration of her colleagues and the gratitude of those she represented. As her career progressed, Olivia's reputation grew, and she soon caught the attention of those in high places. Her integrity, intelligence, and commitment to justice made her a prime candidate for a judicial position. When the opportunity arose, Olivia applied for a seat on the bench, knowing that it would give her a greater platform to effect change and uphold the principles she held dear. The selection process was rigorous, but Olivia's qualifications and character shone through. She was appointed as a judge, becoming one of the few African American women to hold such a position in her jurisdiction. As she took her oath of office, Olivia felt a profound sense of responsibility and pride. She knew that her role as a judge was not only a personal achievement, but also a symbol of progress and hope for her community. From the moment she donned her judicial robes, Judge Olivia Thompson became a force to be reckoned with in the courtroom. Her rulings were fair, impartial, and grounded in the principles of justice and equality. She treated every person who appeared before her with respect and dignity, regardless of their background or circumstances. Her courtroom became a beacon of hope for those seeking justice, and her reputation as a fair and compassionate judge spread far and wide. Despite her success, Judge Thompson never forgot her roots or the struggles faced by her community. She used her position to advocate for reform and to address systemic inequalities within the legal system. She spoke out against racial profiling, police brutality, and the disproportionate incarceration of people of color. Her voice became a powerful instrument for change, inspiring others to join her in the fight for justice. As she sat in her chambers one evening, reflecting on her journey and the challenges that lay ahead, Judge Olivia Thompson felt a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that her work was far from over and that the road to true equality was long and arduous. But she also knew that she had the strength, the knowledge, and the determination to make a difference. With a resolute heart and an unwavering commitment to justice, she prepared herself for the battles to come, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Little did she know that a seemingly routine traffic stop would soon put her convictions to the test and thrust her into the spotlight in a way she had never anticipated. But for now, Judge Olivia Thompson focused on the present, ready to dispense justice and uphold the law, one case at a time. On a chilly autumn evening, Judge Olivia Thompson found herself behind the wheel of her car, navigating the busy streets of the city after a long and demanding day in court. The weight of her judicial robes had been lifted, but the responsibility of her position never truly left her shoulders. As she drove, her mind wandered to the cases she had presided over that day, the lives she had impacted, and the justice she had sought to uphold. Lost in thought, Olivia barely noticed the flashing lights in her rearview mirror. It took a moment for her to register that a police officer was signaling for her to pull over. With a sigh, she carefully maneuvered her car to the side of the road, wondering what could have prompted the traffic stop. She mentally reviewed her recent driving, confident that she had not violated any traffic laws. As she waited for the officer to approach, Olivia took a deep breath, reminding herself to remain calm and composed. She had encountered her fair share of law enforcement officers in her line of work, and she knew that even the most routine interactions could quickly escalate if not handled with care. The officer, a middle-aged white man with a stern expression, approached Olivia's car with a purposeful stride. He tapped on her window, and she promptly rolled it down, greeting him with a polite smile. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" she asked, her voice steady and professional. The officer's demeanor, however, was far from cordial. He looked at Olivia with a mixture of suspicion and disdain, his eyes narrowing as he scanned her face and the interior of her car. "License and registration," he demanded, his tone harsh and abrupt. Olivia complied, handing over her documents with a sense of unease. She had experienced her share of prejudice and discrimination throughout her life, but the officer's hostile attitude caught her off guard. As he scrutinized her license, she wondered what could have prompted such a reaction. "Do you know why I pulled you over?" the officer asked, his voice dripping with condescension. Olivia shook her head, maintaining her composure despite the officer's aggressive tone. "No, officer, I do not. I believe I was driving in accordance with the traffic laws." The officer scoffed, a smirk playing on his lips. "You people always think you're above the law, don't you? Driving around in your fancy cars, thinking you can get away with anything." Olivia felt a surge of anger at the officer's blatant racism, but she quickly tamped it down, knowing that reacting with emotion would only escalate the situation. Instead, she took a deep breath and spoke calmly. "Officer, I assure you that I have not violated any traffic laws. If you could please clarify the reason for this stop, I would appreciate it." The officer's face hardened, and he leaned closer to the window, his voice low and menacing. "I don't need to clarify anything to you. You people are always up to no good, and it's my job to keep the streets safe from the likes of you." Olivia's heart raced as she realized the gravity of the situation. She was not just facing a routine traffic stop. She was confronting the ugly face of racism and abuse of power. The officer's words stung, but she refused to let them shake her resolve. She knew that she had to handle this situation with the utmost care, not only for her own safety, but also for the greater cause of justice. Taking a moment to gather her thoughts, Olivia looked the officer directly in the eye, her voice firm and unwavering. "Officer, I understand that you have a duty to uphold the law, but I assure you that I have done nothing wrong. I am a law-abiding citizen and a respected member of this community. I ask that you treat me with the same respect and professionalism that you would extend to any other individual." The officer's face contorted with rage, and he reached for the handle of Olivia's car door, his intentions unclear. In that moment, Olivia knew that she had to act quickly and decisively. She had to assert her rights and her dignity, not only for herself but for all those who had been victimized by the very system meant to protect them. With a steadying breath, Olivia prepared to face the confrontation head-on, armed with the strength of her convictions and the power of her position. She knew that the next few moments would be crucial, not only for her own safety but for the greater fight against injustice that lay ahead. As the officer's hand gripped the handle of Olivia's car door, she felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. She knew that the next few moments would be critical in determining the outcome of this confrontation. With a calm and measured voice, she spoke. "Officer, I advise you to step away from my vehicle. You have no legal right to open my door without my consent or probable cause." The officer's face twisted into a sneer, his eyes blazing with anger. "I don't take orders from people like you," he spat, his words dripping with contempt. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Think you can tell me how to do my job?" Olivia remained composed, her voice steady and unwavering. "Officer, I am not trying to tell you how to do your job. I am simply asserting my rights as a citizen. I have complied with your request for my license and registration, and I have answered your questions truthfully. If you have a valid reason for detaining me further, please state it now. Otherwise, I respectfully request that you allow me to leave." The officer's grip on the door handle tightened, and for a moment, Olivia feared that he would forcibly open the door. But instead, he leaned closer to the window, his face mere inches from hers. "You people always think you're entitled to special treatment," he growled. "You drive around in your fancy cars, living in your fancy homes, thinking you're better than the rest of us. Well, let me tell you something, Missy. Out here, On these streets, I'm the one in charge, and I don't care who you think you are." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine at the officer's words, but she refused to let her fear show. She had faced discrimination and prejudice before, but never had she encountered such blatant racism from a law enforcement officer. She knew that she had to stand her ground, not only for herself, but for all those who had been victimized by the very people sworn to protect them. Taking a deep breath, Olivia looked the officer directly in the eye, her gaze unwavering. "Officer, your words and actions are not only unprofessional, but also deeply offensive. I have done nothing to warrant this treatment, and I will not tolerate being spoken to in such a manner. I ask again, do you have a valid reason for detaining me, or am I free to go?" The officer's face reddened with rage, and for a moment, Olivia thought he might lash out physically. But instead, he stepped back from the car, his hand moving to rest on his holstered weapon. "You're not going anywhere until I say so," he said, his voice low and threatening. "I have the authority to detain you for as long as I see fit, and there's nothing you can do about it." Olivia's heart raced, but she refused to back down. She knew that the officer's actions were a clear abuse of power, and she would not allow herself to be intimidated. With a calm and measured voice, she spoke. "Officer, I understand that you have the authority to detain individuals when there is probable cause. However, I have given you no reason to suspect me of any wrongdoing. If you continue to detain me without justification, I will have no choice but to file a formal complaint against you and your department." The officer's eyes widened at Olivia's words, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of uncertainty cross his face. But just as quickly, his expression hardened, and he leaned in close once more. "You think you can threaten me?" he hissed. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I can make your life a living hell, and there's nothing you or anyone else can do about it." Olivia felt a surge of anger at the officer's blatant abuse of power, but she refused to let it cloud her judgment. She knew that she had to remain calm and level-headed if she was going to navigate this situation successfully. With a steadying breath, she reached for her purse, her movements slow and deliberate. The officer's hand twitched towards his weapon, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his voice tight with tension. Olivia looked up at him, her expression calm and resolute. "I am reaching for my identification," she said, her words measured and precise. "I think it's time for you to know exactly who you are dealing with, officer." With that, she pulled out her judicial identification card, holding it up for the officer to see. As his eyes widened in shock and recognition, Olivia knew that the tide had turned in her favor. But the battle was far from over, and she steeled herself for the confrontation that was sure to come. As Olivia held up her judicial identification card, the officer's eyes widened in disbelief. He stared at the card, his mouth agape, as the realization of who he had been confronting slowly sank in. The air between them seemed to crackle with tension as the power dynamic shifted palpably. "Judge Olivia Thompson," the officer mumbled, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't realize." Olivia fixed him with a steely gaze, her voice calm but firm. "Officer, I have identified myself as a member of the judiciary. I am well aware of my rights and the limits of your authority. Now, I ask you again, do you have a valid reason for detaining me, or am I free to go?" The officer's face paled, and he took a step back from the car, his hand dropping from his weapon. I apologize, Your Honor," he stammered, his earlier bravado completely evaporated. "I didn't mean any disrespect. I was just doing my job." Olivia's eyes narrowed, and she spoke with a quiet intensity. "Officer, your actions today have been far beyond the scope of your job. You have engaged in blatant racial profiling, made baseless accusations, and abused your authority. This is not how a law enforcement officer should conduct themselves." The officer's shoulders slumped, and he looked down at the ground, unable to meet Olivia's gaze. I'm sorry, Your Honor. I don't know what came over me. It won't happen again." Olivia shook her head, her expression a mix of disappointment and resolve. "Officer, an apology is not enough. Your actions today are symptomatic of a much larger problem within our law enforcement system. Racial profiling and abuse of power have no place in a just society, and they certainly have no place among those sworn to uphold the law." The officer shifted uncomfortably, his earlier defiance completely deflated. "I understand, Your Honor. I'll report myself to my superiors. I'll accept whatever consequences they see fit. Olivia's gaze softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. I appreciate your willingness to take responsibility for your actions, officer. However, this incident cannot be swept under the rug. I will be filing a formal complaint with your department, and I expect a full investigation into your conduct. Furthermore, I will be advocating for systemic changes to address the broader issues of racial bias and misconduct within law enforcement. The officer nodded, his expression a mix of shame and resignation. I understand, Your Honor. I'll cooperate fully with any investigation. I know I was in the wrong, and I'm prepared to face the consequences. Olivia took a deep breath, her resolve unwavering. I hope that this incident will serve as a wake-up call, officer. We cannot allow racism and abuse of power to go unchecked, especially among those who are sworn to serve and protect. It is our duty, as officers of the law and as citizens, to stand up against injustice wherever we see it. The officer nodded slowly, his earlier arrogance completely vanished. You're right, Your Honor. I have a lot to reflect on. I promise that I will do better, and I will work to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. Olivia's expression softened slightly, and she nodded in acknowledgement. I believe that people can change, officer, but change requires more than just words. It requires action, accountability, and a genuine commitment to doing what is right. I hope that you will take this opportunity to grow and to become a better officer and a better person. With that, Olivia put her judicial identification card back in her purse and looked at the officer expectantly. Now, unless there is anything else, I believe we are done here. The officer nodded, stepping back from the car and gesturing for Olivia to proceed. You're free to go, Your Honor. And thank you. Thank you for holding me accountable and for giving me the chance to make things right. Olivia nodded, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of her lips. That's all any of us can ask for, officer, a chance to do better, to be better. Let's make sure we don't waste it. With that, she rolled up her window and pulled away from the curb, her mind already racing with the steps she would need to take to address this incident and the broader issues it represented. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but Olivia knew that she was ready to face it head-on. For the sake of justice, for the sake of her community, and for the sake of a better future for all. As Olivia drove away from the scene of the confrontation, her mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. She had faced discrimination and prejudice before, but never had she encountered such blatant racism from a law enforcement officer. The experience had shaken her to her core, but it had also strengthened her resolve to fight for justice and equality. Pulling into the parking lot of her office, Olivia sat in her car for a moment, taking deep breaths to calm her racing heart. She knew that the incident with the officer was just the tip of the iceberg, a symptom of a much larger problem that plagued the criminal justice system. But she also knew that she had the power and the platform to make a difference. With a determined stride, Olivia entered her office, ignoring the curious glances from her colleagues. She closed the door behind her and sat down at her desk, her mind already formulating a plan of action. She knew that she needed to address the incident with the officer, but she also needed to use her position to raise awareness about the broader issues of racial profiling and police misconduct. Picking up her phone, Olivia dialed the number of the police commissioner, a man she had worked with on several occasions. When he answered, she wasted no time in getting to the point. Commissioner, this is Judge Olivia Thompson. I need to speak with you urgently about an incident that occurred earlier today. The commissioner listened intently as Olivia recounted the details of her encounter with the officer, his voice growing increasingly concerned as she described the officer's racist remarks and abuse of power. When she finished, the commissioner was silent for a moment, his shock palpable even over the phone. Judge Thompson, I am deeply troubled by what you have told me, he said finally, his voice heavy with emotion. I want to assure you that this kind of behavior is completely unacceptable and will not be tolerated within our department. I will personally oversee the investigation into this officer's conduct, and I promise you that appropriate disciplinary action will be taken. Olivia nodded, her voice firm and resolute. I appreciate your commitment to addressing this issue, Commissioner, but I must also stress that this incident is not an isolated one. Racial profiling and police misconduct are systemic problems that require systemic solutions. We need to take a hard look at the way our law enforcement agencies operate and make meaningful changes to ensure that all citizens are treated with fairness and respect. The commissioner was silent for a moment, and Olivia could hear the weight of her words sinking in. "You're right, Judge Thompson," he said finally, his voice heavy with responsibility. "We have a lot of work to do to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the communities we serve. I pledge to work with you and other community leaders to develop and implement meaningful reforms that address these issues at their root." Olivia felt a surge of hope at the commissioner's words, but she knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. "Thank you, Commissioner," she said, her voice filled with determination. "I look forward to working with you to create a more just and equitable criminal justice system, but I also know that change cannot happen behind closed doors. We need to bring these issues into the light and engage the community in the process of reform." The commissioner agreed, and the two spent the next several minutes discussing potential strategies for raising awareness and involving the community in the process of change. When they finally hung up, Olivia felt a renewed sense of purpose and determination. Rising from her desk, she walked over to the window and looked out at the city below. She knew that the fight for justice and equality would not be easy, but she also knew that it was a fight worth fighting. With a deep breath, she turned back to her desk and began drafting a statement to the press, outlining her experience with the officer and her commitment to addressing the broader issues of racial profiling and police misconduct. As she typed, Olivia felt a sense of power and purpose that she had never felt before. She knew that she had the ability to make a real difference in the lives of her fellow citizens, and she was determined to use her position and her platform to do just that. For the first time in her career, she felt truly alive, truly connected to the cause of justice that had always been her guiding light. With a final keystroke, Olivia finished her statement and leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. She knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but she also knew that she was ready to face it head-on. For the sake of her community, for the sake of justice, and for the sake of a better future for all. In the days following Olivia's confrontation with the police officer, the incident quickly gained national attention. The story of a respected African-American judge being subjected to blatant racism and abuse of power by a law enforcement officer sparked outrage and calls for change from communities across the country. As the media descended upon the city, Olivia found herself at the center of a firestorm of attention. Reporters clamored for interviews, and community leaders and activists sought her out for guidance and support. While the attention was overwhelming at times, Olivia knew that it was an opportunity to shed light on the systemic issues of racial profiling and police misconduct that had long plagued the criminal justice system. With a calm and measured approach, Olivia used her platform to speak out about her experience and the broader issues at play. She gave interviews to national media outlets, participated in community forums and rallies, and met with local and state officials to discuss strategies for reform. As the community rallied behind her, Olivia was heartened by the outpouring of support and solidarity. People from all walks of life, from all racial and ethnic backgrounds, came together to demand change and accountability from law enforcement. Marches and protests were held in the streets, and community leaders and activists worked tirelessly to keep the momentum going. But Olivia knew that the fight for justice and equality was not just about one incident or one officer. It was about a system that had long been broken, a system that had perpetuated racism and inequality for generations. She knew that true change would require a sustained effort from all sectors of society, from law enforcement to the courts to the community at large. As the investigation into the officer's conduct proceeded, Olivia worked closely with the police commissioner and other officials to develop a comprehensive plan for reform. She advocated for increased training and accountability measures for officers, as well as greater transparency and oversight in the handling of complaints of misconduct. But Olivia also knew that reform could not happen in a vacuum. She reached out to community leaders and organizations, seeking their input and collaboration in the process of change. She worked to build bridges between law enforcement and the communities they served, knowing that trust and understanding were essential for true progress to be made. As the weeks turned into months, Olivia's efforts began to bear fruit. The officer who had confronted her was found guilty of misconduct and dismissed from the force, sending a powerful message that racism and abuse of power would not be tolerated. New training programs and accountability measures were implemented within the police department, and a community oversight board was established to provide greater transparency and input from the public. But Olivia knew that the work was far from over. The systemic issues of racism and inequality that had long plagued the criminal justice system would not be solved overnight, and there would be many more battles to come. But she was determined to keep fighting, to keep pushing for change and progress, no matter how long it took. As she sat in her office one evening, reflecting on the events of the past few months, Olivia felt a sense of pride and purpose that she had never known before. She had always been committed to justice and equality, but now she felt truly connected to the struggle in a way that she had never been before. Looking out at the city skyline, Olivia knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but she also knew that she was not alone. With the support of her community, the dedication of her colleagues, and the strength of her own convictions, she knew that change was possible. And so, with a deep breath and a renewed sense of determination, Olivia turned back to her work, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For she knew that the fight for justice and equality was not just her fight, but the fight of all those who believed in a better, more just world. And she was ready to lead the charge, one step at a time. As the investigation into the officer's conduct began, Olivia found herself at the center of a complex and emotionally charged process. The Internal Affairs Division of the Police Department launched a full-scale inquiry into the incident, interviewing witnesses, reviewing body camera footage, and examining the officer's prior record of service. Olivia cooperated fully with the investigation, providing a detailed account of her encounter with the officer and the events that had led up to it. She knew that her testimony would be crucial in determining the outcome of the case, and she was determined to see justice served. As the investigation proceeded, evidence began to emerge that painted a troubling picture of the officer's past behavior. Other instances of racial profiling and excessive use of force came to light, suggesting a pattern of misconduct that had gone unchecked for far too long. Olivia watched as the case against the officer grew stronger with each passing day. Witnesses came forward to corroborate her account of the incident, and the body camera footage provided damning evidence of the officer's racist remarks and abuse of power. But even as the case against the officer seemed to be building, Olivia knew that the road to justice would not be an easy one. The police union had rallied behind the officer, providing him with legal representation and public support. Some members of the law enforcement community even went so far as to accuse Olivia of playing the race card and seeking to undermine the authority of the police. Olivia refused to be deterred by these attacks. She knew that the fight for justice and equality was bigger than any one person, and she was determined to see it through to the end. She continued to speak out about her experience and the broader issues at play, even as the backlash against her grew more intense. As the investigation entered its final stages, Olivia held her breath in anticipation. She knew that the outcome of the case would have far-reaching implications, not just for her own life but for the entire community. If the officer was found guilty and disciplined accordingly, it would send a powerful message that racism and abuse of power would not be tolerated within the ranks of law enforcement. But if he was allowed to walk free, it would only reinforce the cynicism and mistrust that had long plagued the relationship between the police and the communities they served. Finally, after weeks of intensive investigation, the verdict was announced. The officer was found guilty of misconduct and immediately dismissed from the force. The decision was met with a mix of relief and vindication from Olivia and her supporters, who saw it as a crucial step forward in the fight for justice and accountability. But even as they celebrated the victory, Olivia knew that the work was far from over. The investigation had uncovered deeper issues within the police department, systemic problems that would require sustained effort and commitment to address. She knew that she would need to continue to push for reform and change, to work with community leaders and law enforcement officials to build a more just and equitable system for all. In the days and weeks that followed, Olivia threw herself into this work with renewed energy and determination. She met with the police commissioner and other high-ranking officials to discuss strategies for improving training, accountability, and community relations within the department. She worked with community organizations and advocacy groups to develop grassroots initiatives aimed at building trust and fostering dialogue between law enforcement and the public. Through it all, Olivia remained a voice of calm and reason, a steadfast advocate for justice and equality in the face of even the most daunting challenges. She knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but she also knew that change was possible if only they had the courage and the commitment to see it through. Looking back on the events of the past few months, Olivia felt a sense of pride and purpose that she had never known before. She had always been committed to justice and equality, but now she felt truly connected to the struggle in a way that she had never been before. And as she looked to the future, she knew that she would continue to fight for what was right, no matter the cost. For the sake of her community, for the sake of justice, and for the sake of a better world for all. As the dust settled on the investigation into the officer's misconduct, Olivia found herself at the center of a new conversation about the future of policing in her community. The incident had exposed deep-seated issues within the department, and there was a growing consensus that meaningful change was needed to rebuild trust and ensure accountability. Olivia knew that she had a unique opportunity to help shape this change. As a respected judge and a vocal advocate for justice and equality, she had the credibility and the platform to push for real, substantive reforms. And so, with a renewed sense of purpose, she set out to do just that. In the weeks and months that followed, Olivia worked tirelessly to build coalitions and forge partnerships with community leaders, advocacy groups, and law enforcement officials. She convened meetings and forums to discuss the challenges facing the department and to brainstorm solutions. She lobbied local and state officials to support legislation aimed at increasing transparency and accountability within law enforcement. At the same time, Olivia knew that real change would require more than just policy reforms. It would require a fundamental shift in the culture and mindset of the department, a willingness to confront hard truths and to engage in honest, sometimes uncomfortable conversations about race, bias, and power. To that end, Olivia worked with the police commissioner to develop a comprehensive training program for officers, one that emphasized de-escalation, cultural competency, and community policing. She helped to establish a civilian oversight board to provide independent review of complaints against officers and to recommend disciplinary action when necessary. And she pushed for greater diversity and inclusion within the department, advocating for the recruitment and promotion of officers from underrepresented communities. Throughout it all, Olivia remained a constant presence in the community, attending neighborhood meetings and events, listening to the concerns and experiences of residents, and working to build bridges between law enforcement and the people they served. She knew that trust and understanding were essential for real progress to be made, and she was determined to do her part to foster both. Slowly but surely, Olivia began to see the fruits of her labors. The department implemented new policies and procedures aimed at increasing accountability and transparency, and there was a noticeable shift in the way officers interacted with the community. Complaints against officers decreased, and surveys showed a growing sense of trust and confidence in the department among residents. But Olivia knew that the work was far from over. The systemic issues that had led to the incident with the officer were deeply entrenched, and it would take sustained effort and commitment to root them out entirely. There would be setbacks and challenges along the way, moments of frustration and doubt. But Olivia was undeterred. She had seen firsthand the power of community, the strength that came from people coming together to demand change and to work for a better future. And she knew that, with perseverance and determination, real progress was possible. As she sat in her office one evening, reflecting on the journey that had brought her to this point, Olivia felt a sense of hope and optimism that she hadn't felt in a long time. She knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but she also knew that she was not alone. With the support of her community, the dedication of her colleagues, and the strength of her own convictions, she knew that anything was possible. Looking out at the city skyline, Olivia smiled to herself, thinking of all the work that lay ahead. There would be more late nights and tough conversations, more battles to be fought and won. But she was ready for it all, ready to keep pushing forward, to keep fighting for justice and equality, for as long as it took. For Olivia knew that this was more than just a job or a cause. It was a calling, a true passion to make a difference in the world. And with that knowledge, she felt a sense of purpose and determination that would guide her through whatever challenges lay ahead. She was ready to lead the charge, to be a voice for the voiceless and a champion for the oppressed. And she knew that, together, they could build a better, more just world for all. As the months turned into years, Olivia's tireless efforts to reform the police department and build a more just and equitable community began to bear fruit. The changes she had fought for, the new policies and procedures, the training programs and oversight boards, had taken root, slowly but surely transforming the culture and practices of law enforcement in the city. But Olivia knew that the work was never truly finished. Each new day brought new challenges and new opportunities, new chances to make a difference in the lives of those around her. And so, she continued to push forward, to advocate for change, and to lead by example, even when the road ahead seemed long and the obstacles insurmountable. Through it all, Olivia drew strength from the people around her, from the community leaders and activists who stood beside her in the fight for justice, from the dedicated officers who worked tirelessly to serve and protect their city, and from the countless ordinary citizens who believed in the power of change and the promise of a better tomorrow. She saw their strength and resilience in the face of adversity, their courage and determination in the pursuit of what was right. And she knew that, together, they could achieve anything they set their minds to. As the years passed, Olivia's story became a symbol of hope and inspiration for people across the country. Her unwavering commitment to justice and equality, her fierce determination in the face of overwhelming odds, had touched the lives of countless individuals and communities, sparking a movement that extended far beyond the borders of her own city. She was invited to speak at conferences and events across the nation, to share her experiences and insights with others who were fighting their own battles for change. She became a mentor and a role model for a new generation of leaders, young men and women who looked to her as an example of what was possible when one had the courage and the conviction to stand up for what was right. And through it all, Olivia remained humble and grounded, never losing sight of the simple truths that had guided her throughout her life. She knew that change was hard, that progress was often slow and painful, but she also knew that it was worth fighting for, that each small victory, each step forward, brought them closer to the world they dreamed of building. As she looked back on her journey, from the young girl who had watched her parents struggle against discrimination and injustice, to the respected judge and community leader she had become, Olivia felt a sense of pride and purpose that filled her heart to bursting. She knew that she had been blessed with a unique opportunity to make a difference in the world, to use her talents and her position to fight for the values she held dear. And she knew that she would continue to do so for as long as she had breath in her body. For Olivia, the fight for justice and equality was more than just a calling or a career. It was a way of life, a sacred duty that she had been entrusted with, and she would not rest until that duty was fulfilled, until every person, regardless of race or background, could live in a world of true freedom and opportunity. As she sat in her office, looking out at the city she loved, Olivia felt a sense of hope and determination that she knew would sustain her through whatever challenges lay ahead. She knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, that there would be setbacks and obstacles along the way. But she also knew that she was not alone, that she was part of a movement that extended far beyond herself, a movement that had the power to change the world. And with that knowledge, she felt a sense of strength and purpose that would guide her forward, one step at a time. So she took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and turned back to her work, ready to face whatever lay ahead. For she knew that, together, they could build a better, more just world for all. And that was a fight worth fighting, no matter how long it took.